on this episode of Raising the Wild Ones podcast.
Today we have, you said call you Ted. I feel like I should call you Dr. Hildebrandt, but we'll call you Ted. Okay.
And I felt actually some people get their call of God early in their life and stuff. I think, to be honest with you, I didn't feel a real strong calling until I was about 60. And all of a sudden God is saying, hey man, do what's in your head. And my head was to take biblical studies stuff and digital stuff and put them together and put it out there for people. So places like in 1 John 5:7, where it talks about the Trinity, the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, we know that Erasmus added that in the 16th century. So, and then the ending of the book of Mark is a question. Also the big one, of course, with the who's going to cast the first stone at the woman in John 7 and 8 there. We know that those aren't in the best manuscripts.
Raising the Wild Ones podcast.
All right. Well, I guess, do you want to start this one off, Caleb, or do you want me to?
Yeah, I can start it off. Today we have, you said call you Ted. I feel like I should call you Dr. Hildebrandt, but we'll call you Ted. Okay. So today we have a really awesome guest, Dr. Ted Hildebrandt, and we'll let him introduce himself here in just a minute. But I was telling him just before we got on, about a year ago, I think it was around a year ago roughly, but maybe last summer, but I had some, I'm a school teacher, so I was off. I had some extra time, so I was watching some of your lectures I stumbled across, and I'm pretty sure it was New Testament theology, because I looked back and I watched a bunch of the New Testament theology video lectures you have, and I was like, man, this is really interesting, and I learned a lot of stuff, and some of the things you said in your lectures are actually kind of what led us to doing Rednecks Read the Bible, which we haven't done that in a little while. We jumped into hillbilly hermeneutics, and we've done a few other things, but it was really neat. And a few weeks ago, I was like, hey, we should reach out and see. I didn't know if you would respond or not, but luckily you did, and here you are, and we'll let you go ahead and introduce yourself, and then we'll hear those dad jokes you have.
Oh yeah.
Okay, well, thanks for having me on. This is my first podcast ever. And
Awesome.
I was very honored when you guys, invited me to do this. Dad jokes and things. Well, my name is Ted Hildebrandt. I taught, 21 years at a place called Grace College in Winona Lake, Indiana. And that's where I reared my children. And then got an offer out here at Gordon College out in Wenham, Massachusetts, which is a huge shift between Indiana and Massachusetts. And then we taught here for about 21 years. And then I retired, and then instead of giving me the boot, when you retired, if you're in good standing, they give you the title Emeritus. And so I got that. I retired actually just when COVID hit. And
probably a good time to retire.
Yeah, it was. And
yeah.
So I got out and decided that I only, you don't know how many years you got. And I felt actually some people get their call of God early in their life and stuff. I think, to be honest with you, I didn't feel a real strong calling until I was about 60. And all of a sudden God is saying, hey man, do what's in your head. And my head was to take biblical studies stuff and digital stuff and put them together and put it out there for people. And so that's what I started to do. And then when I retired, I've been doing it full time. Like I got up at 5 o'clock this morning. I've been working on it all day, doing various AI things now. And but anyway, but I do have some dad jokes. I got to tell you, however, I asked my wife when the last time she ever heard me tell a joke, and she said she couldn't remember in the last decade. My mother, when I was born and grew up in my house, I was the oldest of 5 kids. I grew up, actually, it was pretty poor, actually. My father worked in a factory, killed himself working 16 hours a day kind of thing in a factory. And none of my brothers and sisters really, when it came time for college, none of them really went to college at all. I was the only one who went. And that plays a background in there. And my mother always said, she said, Ted, you were born old. which I think means you don't tell jokes, you don't do that stuff. However, my wife, who just retired, my wife's brilliant and she's a CPA. She was a brilliant CPA. She just retired. And I heard her play the piano for the first time in probably 2 decades. She sat down and played the piano. And you know something? I used to play piano by ear, but lately I've been using my hands.
That was a good one.
I knew you could. I knew you could bring one. That was good.
That's a good one right there. That was unexpected. That was like woven perfectly into the story.
Right into the story. Yeah.
That's key.
Now,
Crucial.
wait a minute.
Good
Wait a
job
minute. We're
there.
not done. Wait, this thing we talk about language, right? Speaking the language of the people. And so I'm in Massachusetts now. And so when we moved here, I had to learn a new language. And first of all, you learn, well, if you speak with an English accent, mate, your IQ goes up 10 points in Massachusetts. If you say y'all, your IQ goes down 10 points in Massachusetts, okay? So that's how it works here. And then they say things like ka. Do you know what a ka is? Ka, instead of saying car.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
They say lobster, and glasta, and woosta. So they take the R off, but then they keep the R because then when you say idea, they say ideer. So they stick the R on at the end. So do you know what they call here fake spaghetti?
What?
An impasta.
Pasta.
Oh,
Impasta.
go.
That's a good one.
That's just a Massachusetts joke. So okay, enough with that.
See, around here, if you say y'all, your IQ goes up.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
And if you don't say y'all, you're like, this person's not from around here.
There's a really good chance that even in some of the emails going back and forth that I might have said y'all, at some point.
Yeah.
Well, you talked a little bit about kind of your website and stuff, and I pulled it up and I was looking at it, and I'll kind of pub your website here a little bit. That's biblicallearning.org, and there's a lot of real cool stuff going on there. So I guess we could
e-learning.
Oh, so I was trying to read from far away. Biblicalelearning.org, and I guess would that be a good spot to kind of start there? Do you want to kind of tell us kind of maybe a little bit about that?
Yeah. When I was younger, I was trained in electrical engineering, University of Buffalo. And when I finished up the school there, University of Buffalo was a center of what they call secular humanism back in the 70s, early 70s. And I didn't have a lot of answers. And I took some philosophy courses. And I as a Christian, I didn't have any answers to these major questions. And so then my friend went down to a place called Biblical Theological Seminary. And I thought, I'm going to go check out seminary for a semester to see if I can figure out some of this stuff, all these questions I got. And so anyway, so I went down to seminary and then fell in love with it and then did seminary, and we lived in Israel for a year and came back and started teaching in Bristol, Tennessee. So I got my 2 years down south, and then I ended up moving up to Winona Lake, Indiana, at Grace, and taught there for 20. But I couldn't figure out for years. It was like, God, I wasted my 4 years in college doing all this engineering stuff. And it was like, God, why did you let me waste that? I mean, I was working 20 hours a week and taking 20 hours engineering courses. It just about killed me. And I thought, why did I have to, you just get killed. And then all of a sudden in the late 80s, I picked up a PC and it was like, holy cow, man, I know how this thing works. And all of a sudden my biblical studies and my digital stuff came together. And so then I have all these things in my head. And so I made a thing called Greek Tutor that taught people Greek on a CD-ROM. If anybody remembers what a CD-ROM is anymore.
Yep.
But
oh yeah.
and then I made Hebrew Tutor, and those two things were sold by Parsons Technology. So then I taught at Gordon, and I still have this passion for doing the digital stuff because I realized that digital is the language of the people. And God always speaks the language of the people. When they spoke Hebrew, he spoke Hebrew. When they switched in Babylon and started coming back with Aramaic, he spoke Aramaic. And Jesus spoke Aramaic. Jesus spoke other languages too, probably. And then when they switched to Greek, the New Testament's written in Greek. And so God always speaks the language of the people. And the language of the people today is digital. In other words, where do I learn stuff today? I don't want to tell you, man. I've got to figure out how to cut down a tree in my yard, and I got a chainsaw and I got a tree. I don't know what I'm doing. What do I do? I go to YouTube and I learn how to cut down a tree.
Oh yeah.
Okay. And so I learned a ton of stuff from YouTube. So I thought, why not? And then why not? I know a lot of these scholars because I've been hung out in those circles and stuff. But to be honest, with you, I grew up really poor. I had to go back to the University of Buffalo because I didn't have any money. And this thing with money and education has always been a conflict for me. Was I was always working 20, 30 hours a week going to school, and it was tough. And I thought somehow,
Yeah.
why can't we let education be free so that anybody that wants to learn can learn without paying $40,000, $50,000 a year? So then
Oh yeah.
I started tapping people that I knew and said, and then started hiring them to do videos for me on various books. Gary Yates was one of the first ones to do Jeremiah because Jeremiah, Israel's just about ready to go to Babylon. And I thought, America, frankly, we're ready to go to Babylon too, down the tubes. And so I thought Jeremiah would be a great place. Well, Gary did 30 lectures for me on the book of Jeremiah. And I taped them and then I put them up online for free for anybody in the world who wants to watch them. And so then I started doing that. And then as COVID hit, I was teaching and I wanted to go out on top. You can teach beyond, you get to be an old man, and pretty soon you're not an effective teacher. And I didn't want to hurt the word of God by being an old man teacher and stuff. So I thought now's the time to retire. And Marv Wilson and Roger Green and Elaine Phillips, my friends, they all retired too. So we were all kind of a cadre there. And then I said, well, now I can focus on this biblical learning full time. So I started then taping people and putting it up. And I've got most every book of the Bible is covered now, almost every book. And with major lecture series, they're all available free. They're done by everybody that's on there is a major is taught it like Bruce Waltke has taught like for I don't want to say 50 years, but probably is 50 years and is just top of his game field. And guys like Craig Keener, who taught at Asbury now, is retired now, and Craig was there. John Walton at Wheaton is a friend of mine, and John had me over to his house, and he did Job, the book of Job, and anything. Leslie Allen, who just passed away at Fuller, actually just passed away. He did Ezekiel and he did Lamentations. That was a hard one. Who studies Lamentations?
Yeah.
So I taped these people, then I put up the videos on YouTube, and then I put the audios, and then I had my students for extra credit, kids that were failing, I'd have them transcribe the lectures into English, like take and write down what the guy said. And then I would type those up. So I'd have full transcriptions, but it took about 8 hours of them doing that. And it took me another 2 hours to correct their stuff. And then now I got on a thing called TurboScribe. It's AI that I just put the audio in there and hit the button. And 5 minutes later, I get a full transcription.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So I've gone through and transcribed all the lectures. There's full transcription. And then I decided, well, hey, man, why not? Google Translate used to be terrible. Sorry, Google, but of late, they've gone more AI, and it's actually pretty good. And so what I did was I translated the translation in English into 12 different languages. And I thought, hey, here I am in my basement, and I'm making all these videos available in Hindi for India.
Man.
And in Russian for Russians, and Portuguese for Portuguese, Spanish, French, German, Persian. In the Iran, there's Christians becoming Christians in Iran. So I thought, why not do Persian? So I did Persian, and anyway, so I'm working on that now, actually, with the audio. That's another step that AI is helping me with. But then, anyways, I can go on and on. But then I've taken each one of the lectures and I put it into a thing called Notebook LM. And it's a Google product. It's called Notebook LM. And it's just notebooklm.google.com. And it's one of the most incredible teaching things. You put it in there, put your lecture in there, hit the button, and it makes a synopsis for it, a paragraph synopsis, and then gives you a white doc, a briefing document, a study guide, an FAQ, and then it also produces a podcast built off the video with just hitting one button. And it's just incredible. And so my brother listens to the lectures. He says, hey, Ted, the podcast is actually better than the lectures. So I've gone through and done the Notebook LM thing to all like 1,200 videos. And so now I'm working on another thing, putting it into audio from text, going text to audio. So that's what I'm working on now. I got actually six computers downstairs and I have them run six different languages all at one time. But you got to wear headphones because otherwise you go bananas. But
Oh, I bet. Well,
anyway,
I
so
mean,
that's the kind of thing, but it's all free. And it's, I've got Greek, there's Greek and Hebrew there, there's geography, there's archaeology. I've had a major archaeologist there, church history. I linked to a guy named Ryan Reeves who goes through church history. There's theology by Robert Peterson, who's a good friend of mine, who does kind of a reformed theology thing. I hate to say it, I'm not reformed, but I was kind of, I used to be, but I kind of moved away and went down the tubes, I guess, from they would look at it. But I try to stick real close to the Bible. I think that's one of the things, and that's why a lot of the things you'll notice are all biblical text oriented.
Mhm.
yeah. Well,
So
and I'll
that's
say
kind of
I,
my
I totally just pulled up your YouTube just to kind of like take a look, and it says you have like 2.7 thousand or 2.7K videos. You have a ton of videos on YouTube, and it's just, I mean, it's just awesome to think about that because I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, I just recently got quail. We got given some quail, and what was the first thing I did? I went to YouTube and I like just put in like how to take care of quail, and it's like bam, like here's some videos. And it's like you learn all this stuff, but it's like you could do the exact same thing with scripture and trying to figure out, how to what's a good translation for this, or what's a good,
Mhm.
commentary on this passage, or how do you learn more about this and that. And it's, I mean, because
yeah.
I agree. So I'm currently working on my master's in theology and all that kind of stuff. And
Okay.
man, YouTube's a good spot to go to try to understand some of that stuff too, when maybe the book is using.
Yeah, yeah. So it's just what a, Martin
Yeah.
Luther
I
would have
was
been
gonna go
nothing.
ahead.
Martin Luther would have been nothing unless there was a printing press. And the printing
Hmm.
press was developed in about 1456. And all of a sudden, then his tracts and stuff got printed and spread everywhere. Had there been no printing press, he would have been a monk up in Germany. Nobody would have known about him. And so the
Yeah.
printing press allowed for this democratization. And now I look at the internet and I say the internet now allows for democratization of learning and now into multiple languages. So there's, I mean, really over a billion people can listen to these or listen. And it's just an incredible time to be alive. And the AI stuff has just jumped us. This is a whole nother world, man. And it's so cool. Everybody,
Mhm.
a lot of people are, oh no, this is the end of the world. This terrible stuff is going to take over and do all this bad stuff. But I guess my thing is, what they mean for evil, God changes to good. And why do we let all the evil people use all the cool stuff? And my thing is, if it can do all this stuff, why don't we learn how to use it for proclaiming the glory of God? I-
That's a good point. Yeah, we've been wanting to have a podcast talking about the evils of AI. So that's a good kind of counter to that. Using it for the good of God. I like that. But another thing, I've been sitting here going through the website too. One thing that like my mother at one point has mentioned, like she would love to go um, take some theology classes or like New Testament, Old Testament theology, and but she's always like, it costs money, you got to go to class, you got to do all that stuff. But like you said, this is awesome. I mean, there's Old Testament, New Testament, I mean, all sorts of different videos on different theologies and church history. And like I clicked on one, I'm off of it, I can't remember, and like some of them had like the lecture PowerPoints, correct?
yeah, some of them do, not all.
Not all of them. I mean, but it's like some of them do, but I mean, there's so many videos and so many resources here. It's really cool.
If you go down to the bottom of some of them too, I went through the ETS, the JETS journal, the Journal of the Evangelical Theological Society, and pulled in articles from there. And then I also went to the Tyndale Bulletin, which is at Cambridge University, and cataloged all those articles and pulled those into each one of the books. So at the bottom, there's like a bibliography of resources that are free. You just can click on them and boom, you got an article from the Tyndale Bulletin, which is, it's a top flight thing.
Well, I guess a question I kind of have for you, if you don't mind, you kind of talk about the idea of, God calling you to work on this, later in life. I guess I mean, because you're right. We always think about the idea of calling being like, well, God calls you when you're young to work on this and do this. How did that like transform in your life, kind of at the end of your teaching career to all of a sudden jump into the, massive, endeavor of putting these videos out
Uh, Inch by inch, it's a cinch. Yard by yard is too hard.
there?
And so what happened was I started doing, Fred Putnam did 4 lectures on Psalms, 4 lectures on Proverbs. I started just doing little ones. And then all of a sudden I realized some of these people have taught full classes, like David Howard, who's incredible, did Joshua through Ruth. Well, he's taught that course, I don't know how many times at Bethel Seminary. And so he did, and these guys were teaching like Gary Yates and um, John Walton doing his Job thing. And I mean, they taught courses on this stuff. And I thought, why not pull in the whole course and stuff, and rather than just doing the 4 lectures? So then I expanded it, but it's been kind of, I do about 3 a year. And then after, what happens is after like the inch by inch thing, you do 3 a year. And then after a while, it builds up. And anyway, so this summer I did Bob Yarborough, and he did the Johannine epistles. And he's just a phenomenal, really nice guy, one of the nicest guys you'll ever meet, and just a phenomenal scholar. There's a guy at Hillsdale who lives in the village of Hillsdale as a pastor there, but as a PhD at University of Chicago. He did the Ten Commandments. And so he runs through kind of the ancient Near Eastern background to commandments and things like that. And then there was a woman at Taylor University this year who did laments. She does the lament psalms and things like that. And I don't think people understand, or Christian people don't feel that they can really lament. My God, why have you forsaken me? Everybody, when they hear that, they think of Jesus, but no, think of David. David, praying that first. My God, why have you forsaken me? So people have those kind of feelings. So, anyways, Dr. May did from Taylor University, had written a book on it. So she did 3 lectures on that this. So it was, and then Bob Chisholm down in Dallas, Texas, did Amos and then the Suffering Servant. So I went down there and I drove down to Texas. Actually, brought my wife with me on the first one. She likes to fly. She doesn't like to drive. I like to drive. And anyways, that was a long trip for her, but it was delightful for me. So, but it's just that doing 2 or 3 a year, and they build up over time. And
Well, I got another question for you, if you don't mind. You kind of, this is more maybe kind of a theological style question, but you made a comment kind of about people not liking to lament. Why do you think that is, especially like in this culture, people not liking to lament towards God? That just kind of caught my ear, and I'm like, that's interesting. What do you think on that one?
ooh, I think a lot of Christian people that, how should I say, rejoice in the Lord always. And again, I say rejoice. And so everything's happy, the happy, happy, happy Christian kind of thing. And however, a lot of life, man, the things that really transformed me in life were the things that I struggled with, and actually I failed at, and that devastated me. Those are the things that built me up. And it didn't build me up by somebody patting me on the back and saying, well, hey, you just got to believe all things work together for good and everything will be all right. It wasn't all right. And what I needed was, in the time when my wife had a miscarriage and I had to pick her up and her blood was all over me, and I took her to the hospital and she barely made it. And then I had a person quote, scripture to me, but what I really needed was somebody to weep with me. You weep with those that weep. And the problem is that people don't know how to grieve. Everything's kind of got to be made, so we can't face reality. And I guess
Yeah.
I've never been able to escape reality. And I messed up big time in certain things in life that are pretty major things that I messed up. And I got to face that as an individual, but I also got to grieve over my own mistakes, and grieve over I've got friends that have major problems and stuff like that. And I have to be able to lament and say, how long, O Lord, will you forget me forever? I mean, that's a Psalm 13. But
Yeah.
why isn't we can't pray those things out loud? Because I don't know, people take it as being doubt. But when you have a real relationship, like for example, my wife and I are both retired now, so we see a lot of each other for the first time in our lives because we had 4 kids. If every, how should I say, everything in marriage is not happy. So if you learn just happy, 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 you either cover it up and you don't face the reality that you just said something that damaged her. She has to be free enough to say, hey man, you're a jerk. You just hurt me. And I got to be smart enough to say, holy cow, I really did. That was really bad. And I learned to say, I'm sorry and help me to do better. And so I guess a real love, what does love mean? A real relationship of love allows for anger, bitterness,
Mm,
hurt, damage, betrayal, and you have to work through those things. And if you just push them under, that's not what Scripture is. Look at the book of
yeah.
Jeremiah. How many times did he say, "God, what did you do to me, man? I was following you, man, and I end up I'm in this pit, man, and I mean, I've been down here 3 days, and this septic tank isn't working too well for me." So anyway, sorry, but I mean,
Oh no.
Jeremiah does that. The Psalms does that. I mean, Moses does that.
Yeah.
How many times does Moses say, "God, if this is how you're going to treat me, take my life right now"?
Yeah.
And this is Moses, the man of God, the great, writer of the Torah and stuff. And he's saying, and then God comes down and says, okay, okay. And then Moses even barters with God and says, God comes down and says, I'm going to destroy them. I'm going to wipe them all out. Moses says, dog, please don't do that. Please don't go. And it said God changed his mind. So there's a real relationship that's interactive. It's not fossilized. It's not everything happy kind of thing. It's two beings, God and a human being, interacting, and they're wrestling
Yeah.
with each other. And God sometimes comes down and says he regretted that he did that. And what does that mean? And so I guess my thing is, I think we cover over a lot of scripture. The guy I'll never forget, I taped Leslie Allen, and I say this, he just passed away. He was a seminary at Fuller Seminary. He was a professor for decades, and he studied the book of Lamentations. And when I went out there, first of all, he said, do you have anybody for Lamentations? I said, Leslie, nobody studies Lamentations, okay? I know all the scholars, nobody studies Lamentations. He said, well, I've worked in a hospital for 20 years. And he said, I've put the book of Lamentations with my hospital visitation together. And he said, I would do a series on Lamentations for you. When I was out there, then he treated me almost like a son and told me his life story. And his life story was devastating. I mean, I'm almost in tears. I mean, it was devastating. And yet he was British. So when he got up to speak, everything was this, three-piece suit, and he was all academic and stuff. I'm telling him, I didn't tell him this, but it was Leslie, let loose. When you make that statement, let the people know that you know what that statement means from your own experience. But he was all academic and stuff. But when that man spoke, I knew the story behind the guy. And the problem is that, he was in an academic setting, and therefore he didn't feel free to tell the real guts of his story, which he knew really well. And so I guess I wish Christian people could be more honest. I guess that's my problem.
Yeah. You want a funny story about Lamentations? You talk about like nobody talks about Lamentations. So I was a youth pastor for about 8 years, and Caleb, remind me to talk to Joel about this the next time we have him on the podcast. And so, because Joel was there, and so we went to youth camp one day, and there were 5 days we were at youth camp, and I was sitting there thinking, I'm like, Lamentations is 5 chapters, and I'm like, and I was sitting there with the youth group boys, and I was like, hey guys, it's really good. Maybe we should all just pick a book of the Bible and we can read the whole book of Lamentations while we're here at the camp. We just read a chapter a day. And then Joel was like, are you sure you want to pick that one, Dustin? And what's really funny is Joel he was one of my youth, and he's gone on now, kind of, I guess, showing my age a little, but he's gone on. He's gotten his master's degree in Hebrew studies, and we've had him back on to talk about some Hebrews and stuff. But he's like, Dustin, are you sure this is the book you want us to read at youth camp? And I'm like, yeah, it's a great book. It's 5 chapters. We can read it. And like 2 or 3 days in, all of us were like, okay, we're finishing this. We're going to read the whole thing at youth camp this year, but maybe this wasn't the best choice.
Yeah. Oh.
But I do
And
kind of like
kind of,
that. Or go ahead, Caleb.
oh, I was going to say, kind of continuing on, one thing I did hear, or I saw somewhere on here was, like, say, for instance, I know the what I listened to was like Genesis 1, but you've got videos of people speaking actually in Hebrew, reading Genesis, correct?
Well, that's to be honest with you, I went out and I actually all these people I've had to pay them to do the video series, okay? And God's really blessed me in a lot of ways, and so I'm able to do that. But what happened was actually I lived in Israel for a year, and I had some tapes by this guy Abraham Shmuelov, and I kept them for 40 years. And when I retired, I thought I'm going to get those tapes out and I'm going to listen to them. You know what happens to, does anybody remember what cassette tapes are? Anyways, these cassette
Oh,
tapes are
yes.
magnetic. And after 40 years, guess what happens? The magnetism, it goes through
Oh,
the whole tape, destroyed. It was the only thing I brought back from Israel. It was like $125 at that time. That was like the most, it was really expensive for me. I bought the whole thing. The whole thing went, it was bad. So I got online and found him again. And I think one of his nephews or something put his whole thing up there. And so I started doing where you read, it reads to you in like Genesis 1 and go Bereshit bara Elohim. And as it reads Bereshit, it'll say above it in the beginning. And so I'll put the English above it. As he reads, the English will pop up. And so you can read along with him. And if you catch a word that you don't know, you just pop up and the word pops up, you know. So I started doing that. I just made that stuff up. But then he was going too fast, and so I had a friend Perry and Elaine Phillips, and they're fluent in Hebrew, and they said, "Hey, he's even too fast for us." So then I went in Adobe Premiere as a video editing thing, and I basically had to slow it down, put gaps in between where and put all the words in and stuff like that. And so I started doing that. It turns out that those are my big hitters. More people look at that, like you said, Genesis, I did Genesis 1 to 25. The whole book of Deuteronomy is done. Jonah's done. What's the other one? Ruth is done. Those are Jolie, Jonah, and Ruth are what they start in first year Hebrew. And then I also did the whole book of Proverbs. And I also did 40 of the what I consider classic Psalms. So those are, oh, and then I did the book of Exodus, all but the tabernacle. I kind of got lost in the tabernacle, but the first 24 chapters of Exodus are done as well. So there's quite a bit of Hebrew there if somebody's interested. But those are the ones that I have more hits on those than anything else, which is really funny because I just did it on a lark, you know.
yeah. I mean, I'm looking at your top video right now on YouTube is Genesis 1 Hebrew Bible speaker with English captions, you know.
Yeah. And
I've
if you
listened
click
to
on
it
it, you can
several
see it,
times. So
pops up as they go through, and you know, it just
I
you
mean,
should get
those are
back to
just
that, but
those are awesome. I mean, they're awesome resources just to be able to look at and see the Hebrew. For someone like me who took absolutely zero Hebrew, I poured all my time into Greek. Hebrew really confused me, and I'm bad at English, so I figured I'd be really bad at Greek or at Hebrew. So it's like I love to just kind of look at something like that and kind of hear it and see it. And I mean, it's an awesome
for
read to
yeah.
be able
sure.
to look at
I
that
did I
stuff.
did I did the Greek Bible speaker, but it isn't used as much. And then I did it in modern Greek and in Koine Greek readings.
Ah,
And
yeah.
because I taught Greek for 20 years, and so at Gordon, and so I have a whole first year Greek thing is on there. I actually have an avatar guy who flies into my PowerPoints, and he teaches the whole first year Greek, both semesters, first semester, 2 semesters of Greek. And this avatar guy flies into my PowerPoint. He teaches. I actually told my students he was better than I am because he was edited. But when I taught, I was not edited. And so he was actually better than I was.
He was a better teacher.
Another question I had, which this is you were also did some translating for the NLT version of the Bible, correct?
Yeah, I worked in Proverbs with
On
Richard Schultz and Ray Van Leeuwen, and then Tremper Longman was over us.
Yeah, so could you talk about that, what that was like a little bit, and then also, I guess we maybe, I don't know if we want to kind of end on this or we want to, if we got more, we can keep talking, but just kind of talk about, and you've already mentioned it, but God speaking the language of the people and how that changes. And what do you say to as well? What do you say to people that may just say, well, the King James version is the only Bible that's correct? We hear that. Like within the last year, I've had somebody tell me, King James version's it. Maybe the New King James. The NIV was translated by people that don't believe in God, like things like that. So just kind of what are your thoughts and ideas on some of those kind of topics, and of course, what was it like kind of going through that process of being part of that translation of that Bible.
Yeah,
That's a
it
lot.
was, to be honest, he was pretty humbling. I was dealing Richard Schultz, whose father Samuel Schultz actually taught me the Old Testament through his book. I never went to read, but his father's book we used it, and I was with his son then, and Ray Van Leeuwen, of course, had written a major commentary on Proverbs. So we were kind of low level ones and zeros. We did the banging around in the translation, and then Tremper Longman kind of was over us, and he kind of took our three suggestions and made it make sense. We built it off the Living Bible, what was called the Living Bible, which was done by Ken Taylor back in the Billy Graham days. Billy Graham used to give out the Living Bible because it could be understood by a sixth grader. And so the Living Bible, but Ken Taylor, it wasn't a translation. What he did was basically, what do they call it? It's not a translation, but he went from an English Bible into this. He made it easier to read, but he didn't check with Greek and Hebrew at all. He didn't know Greek and Hebrew. His son, Mark Taylor, now is over at Tyndale House, and he then is the one who put this NLT together. And he hired then basically three scholars, maybe more in some other books, but in Proverbs, three scholars to work. And then Tremper Longman was the guy that put it together over us. And then over Tremper, there was an English stylist who made it smooth into English. And then over him, there was a general editor. So he went through all those editorial processes. And it was humbling because I was I get pretty opinionated on some of that stuff. And so I was kind of ticked off. They didn't take my suggestions and stuff. But at a certain point, you got to bite the bullet and say, hey, I mean, Tremper Longman's a much better scholar than I'll ever be. And so I have a great deal of respect for him. And so I got to back off. But I still was right. Anyways, but so there's back and forth on that. Actually, let me just tell you a funny story on that. So I'm out at Gordon College, right? And I'm teaching, and Old Testament was my thing. Okay, so I taught Old Testament every semester. And so I'm teaching, and the kids asked me, what translation do you use? And I said, well, I use I think, what was I using then? The NIV. I used that for years. And they said, but they said, is other translations, the NAB okay? Is the NASB okay? Is the NIV okay? Is the NLT okay? And I said, whoa. On the NLT, and I told the class, you got to be very careful with that. I know some of the translators, and I don't trust those people. So it was a joke, okay? After I told the joke, this big kid, probably 6'2", comes running up to me, sticks out his hand, and he says, what's wrong with the NLT? And I said, hey, man, it was a joke. I was one of the translators. And so I was just kidding, but I knew one of the translators. I said, you can't trust him because he's your teacher, man. And so the kid introduced himself then, and he said, hi, my name is Mark Taylor. And all of a sudden my jaw dropped, and I said, holy cow, man, is Mark Taylor Sr. your dad? He said, Mark Taylor is the guy who did the whole translation. And he said, yeah, that's my dad. And I just like, oh boy, it felt like an absolute fool. Yeah,
That's
only
funny.
in college you get that kind of stuff.
What are the
But
chances?
anyways, but going back to the King James Version, I taught 10 years in a maximum security prison. And Herb King, to his, I say this, still remember him, he was a King James only person. And I got to say, to be honest with you, my head was wired in King James. When I grew up, my dad had me memorize scripture. It was all King James, okay? And I have a great deal of respect. The King James Version was used by the English people for 300 years, and it was a superb translation. And so I don't critique it that way. I have a great deal of respect for it. However, two things. The Greek text now, we know better what the Greek text is because they found papyrus. In 1611, when the King James Version, they didn't even know what papyrus was. And now we found huge libraries, Axorinus Papyrus, et cetera, et cetera. I've got a friend that's all he does. He's a papyrologist from Duke University. He got a PhD in papyrology. They didn't even know about that stuff in 1611. So now we know we have a better, so places like in 1 John 5:7, where it talks about the Trinity, the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, we know that Erasmus added that in the 16th century. So, and then the ending of the book of Mark is a question. Also, the big one, of course, with the who's going to cast the first stone at the woman. in John 7 and 8 there, we know that those aren't in the best manuscripts. And so we have a better manuscript base now and then than the King James people had. Also, I might say the Hebrew that the King James people, while they were very brilliant, and I don't mean to denigrate them at all, we know Hebrew now better because of the Dead Sea Scrolls. The Dead Sea Scrolls are found in 1948, man. These people were in 1611. They never saw Dead Sea Scrolls. And so now we understand the Hebrew. I had to learn Ugaritic, which is a language that's a sister language to Hebrew. And so now some words what's that one? In Proverbs is a word where it talked about this pot having shiny silver on it, but that was a wrong translation. And we found in Ugaritic that what it meant was it was a gloss that they put on a pot. You know, you put a gloss on a pot and you fire it a certain way, that's what it was. It wasn't anything to do with silver. And so, but they couldn't have known that because they didn't know Ugaritic. Ugaritic was only found in the 20th century as well. So all I'm saying is that given from the background of the Greek and Hebrew, we know much better now than they did back then. And then secondly, the language has changed. When you say all the these and thous, now I grew up with that stuff, so I'm cool with that, but it doesn't work in our culture. That's the King James Version. These people can't read Shakespeare anymore. To be honest with you, some of these kids graduate from high school with a 6th grade reading level, and you throw them into something like the King James Version, the kids can't understand it. God speaks the language of the people, and therefore there's need for translations that speak in a modern voice. Now, let me also go back to the NIV. I have mixed feelings. Now, by the way, everybody's moving to the ESV now. A lot of places are moving to ESV. The ESV to me is clumsy. I'm sorry to say it, but it's clumsy. The English is clumsy, and it drives me nuts. Now, and they try to do a more one-to-one, word for word, one-to-one. That doesn't work. You can't do one-to-one between languages. Languages have nuances, and a word in one language may have 10 different meanings, and you got to flex with that. So I have problems with the ESV because it's so wooden and clumsy, but the NIV was not done by unbelievers. The people that did the NIV, I know some of them. Dr. Alan McCrae, who I studied under at Biblical Seminary, he's a wonderful believer. Bruce Walke, who, like I said, taught Psalms. If you want to see his teaching, Bruce Walke and Psalms at Biblical E-Learning. The guy is, people took Walke's classes at Dallas Seminary. You know why they took his classes? Just to hear the man pray. Okay, this man knows God in ways, anyway. And so the people that did the NIV were evangelical believers who did that. Now what's happened is, it seems to me that they got into all this gender stuff, and so of late, okay, that was the original translators of the NIV. Now they've updated it 2011 and some of these other translations. They did that English one that was kind of a DEI kind of thing and they went off. It seemed to me they were trying to get too much into the culture, and I think they ended up messing up and trying to accommodate the scriptures to modern culture. And so I think the NIV has weakened itself in many ways, and that's one of the reasons why the ESV is coming on. But my thing is, I think the best way to study scripture now is you got many translations, is to get many translations out there and look at 4 or 5 of them. I'll even look at the Message. There was a guy, Eugene Peterson, who did a Bible called The Message, and
I got it back there on my shelf.
Some of the translations that Eugene Peterson did, are absolutely brilliant. I read those things and I said, I've wrestled with this text myself and I couldn't get it. I couldn't grasp it and put it into English. And he'll come off with some really cool way of saying it, and so the problem is one guy, Eugene Peterson, it's flat, 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 brilliant, flat, 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 brilliant. And so I think it's worth checking just to see his different take on things. And so I use multiple translations, and I think that's the way to guard against yourself and to get insight, is to use, pick an NIV, pick an ESV, pick a NLT, pick a King James, New King James, and pick the Message up and things at times, and compare them, and you gain insights that way.
Man, I don't know about you, Caleb, but just listening to you talk, Ted, I've got like 4 or 5 other ideas for more podcast episodes. I may just go ahead and line you up, Ted, for the next like 6
Oh,
episodes. you
Oh
know.
no, this is fun.
Um,
It's like you're good at teaching. It's like
Yeah,
you've
exactly.
taught your whole life.
yeah. Well, it's
And
an
that's
honor to
one thing
be.
I've always heard is the best translation. Oh, the best translation is the one you're actually going to read and spend the time learning. And that's one thing I've always heard, which I do like jumping between several different translations, kind of like you said. So that's a good piece of advice.
Well, we're almost at the end here. We've been chatting for just a little bit under an hour or so. But Ted, if you don't mind, is there somewhere that if people want to like contact you or talk to you about your stuff, where can they do that at? Is it, if you have a certain location or certain email or something like that, you feel free to let us know. Where can
Yeah.
people get in contact with you?
Yeah. Actually, and then I had a question for you guys too. It's just
Ooh,
my email is ted dot Hildebrandt HILDEBRANDT, then the @ sign, and then Gordon GORDON.edu. So it's from Gordon College, gordon.edu. And so it's ted.hildebrandt@gordon.edu. And I'd be happy to hear from people. To be honest with you, over the years, I work a lot with a thing called Quizlet. And the reason why I work with
Oh yeah.
Quizlet is because I had students. I actually had blind students and all sorts of stuff. I used to try to figure out how to communicate with them. And so I've learned more from my students than they learned from me. And this one girl suggested I get into Quizlet and stuff. So I'd just like to say, if you guys got any ideas for me and just say, hey, Ted, do you want to try this or try that? I'm really open to it. It takes a while, like this thing I'm working now in the 12 languages, putting it back into oral. By the way, the Bible was originally orally given.
yeah.
Right? It was not written. God spoke to Moses. How much did Jesus write? Jesus said to his disciples. It was oral. So what I'm doing is taking all these videos and putting them orally back into these languages, 12 languages. But it takes a long time. It's probably going to take me 10 months. I'm only one guy in my basement. You know what I'm saying? I just, but the Lord, honestly, the Lord has blessed me materially. And so I'm using that to build this thing. I didn't.
Awesome.
So that's kind of, but if you guys got any ideas or people have ideas, please shoot them my way. I keep a kind of a list of, try this sometime when you get some time,
When you get a chance to try this out. All right.
Yeah.
Well, we definitely can do stuff like that. And yeah. Well, Caleb, you got anything before we kind of close this out here?
I really appreciate it. This has been a lot of fun just listening to you talk and asking you questions, and hopefully we can get you on again sometime because I feel like we could have a lot of cool conversations. So, but again, I really do appreciate you taking the time to talk to us this evening.
My honor, believe me, my honor.
Thank you guys for listening to Raising the Wild Ones podcast. I know me and Caleb are just a couple of redneck theologians, right? Kind of came up with that term a little while ago, and it's just kind of making us laugh. But that's really just what we are, right? Every single one of us is a theologian. Sit there and just think about the Bible, and me and Caleb are rednecks, so that makes us redneck theologians. And so we just thank you guys for listening to us. And if you want to just give us a holler and let us know about topics you may want to listen to or things you may want to say, or if you have an idea for a guest host, or if you yourself want to be a guest host, just drop us a line. Just let us know. Just give us a ring on the old telly. Actually, not really. We don't have a cell phone number, right? But we do have an email, and you can send us an email, right, at raisingwildonespodcast@gmail.com. There'll be a link for that podcast down in the description. And so just kind of click on that and just let us know what you guys want to hear from us. And we like to hear from you guys too. We like to know what you guys think of our podcast. And so also just tell your friends, share it on social media. Just let people know when you're sitting down having a cup of coffee with your hunting buddies or fishing buddies, just say, hey guys, listen to this podcast. It's these two rednecks, and they're kind of weird sometimes, but it's fine because they talk about some cool stuff. And so just let people know, and that's how the word gets out, and that's how it gets shared. So we just thank you guys so much for your support and for listening to us. And yeah, tune in next time for more from the Redneck Theologians.
Hey, Wild Ones, do you love what you've been hearing? are deep dives into theology, Bible stories, and the Word of God? If so, we need your help. For just $6 a month, which is less than a cup of coffee these days, you can join our Patreon community. It's a simple but powerful way to support our mission of sharing the gospel with as many people as possible. And when you join, you'll get some awesome perks like early access to episodes, detailed show notes, and even biblically accurate coloring pages you won't find anywhere else, trust me. Plus, we're giving 10% of everything we receive straight to missions, so your support goes even further. So click the link below in the show notes and join us on Patreon today. Let's keep raising the wild ones together.